The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning. Cream-colored paper, expensive weight, my daughter's careful handwriting addressing it to Walter Hayes. Inside, an invitation to Natalie's wedding at Riverside Estate and Gardens. Beautiful calligraphy, elegant design, every detail perfect. Except for one small problem. My name appeared on the guest list with a handwritten note stapled to the back. "Dad, we need to discuss your attendance. Call me." That phone call would change everything, but not in the way Natalie expected. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The coffee had gone cold by the time Natalie finally answered my call. 3 rings, then her voice came through with that particular tone she'd developed over the past few years. Busy, impatient, like every conversation with her father was an interruption to more important things. "Hi, Dad. Thanks for calling back. We really need to talk about the wedding situation." I held the invitation in my free hand, studying the venue name printed in gold foil, Riverside Estate and Gardens. The property I'd purchased 8 years ago after Dorothy passed away, the investment that had quietly appreciated to nearly $3 million in Portland's booming real estate market.
The business I'd built from an abandoned historic property into one of Oregon's premier event venues. Natalie had no idea I owned it. She'd never asked who did. "What situation would that be, sweetheart?" I kept my voice neutral, curious where this conversation would lead. "Look, Derek's family is very particular about appearances. His mother, Constance, has very specific ideas about how things should be presented." She heard a long pause, the sound of her gathering courage for whatever came next. "They think it might be better if you didn't attend the ceremony itself. Just the reception, maybe. Or perhaps you could come to the rehearsal dinner instead." I set my coffee mug down carefully on the kitchen table. Through the window, Lake Oswego stretched out in morning sunlight, peaceful and unchanged. Inside my chest, something shifted. Not anger, yet, just recognition that a line was being crossed. "Let me understand this correctly. You're uninviting me from your wedding ceremony." "Not uninviting, exactly. Just suggesting a modified attendance plan." Natalie's marketing consultant voice had kicked in, the one she used when trying to sell bad ideas as reasonable compromises. "Derek's family have invited several prominent families from Connecticut, business associates, political connections, people who matter for Derek's career advancement. His mother feels that explaining our family background might create awkward conversations." Our family background? I'd built Hayes Construction and Development from nothing over 40 years. Started with a single crew and a beat-up truck, expanded into commercial real estate, made enough money to send Natalie to private schools, fund her expensive tastes, support her through 3 different career attempts before she settled into sporadic marketing work. That family background. What exactly about our background concerns Constance? Another pause, longer this time. When Natalie spoke again, her voice carried a strange mixture of embarrassment and defiance. "Dad, you're a contractor. Derek's father, Richard, is a senior partner at an investment firm. His guests include a state senator, 2 federal judges, and the CEO of a pharmaceutical company. They're accustomed to certain social circles." "I see. And which social circle do I belong to?" "That's not fair. You're twisting my words. I'm just trying to make this day perfect. Derek's family is paying for half the wedding expenses. They have some say in how things are handled." The irony was exquisite. Derek's family was paying for half. The venue they'd chosen, the one Natalie believed they'd gotten at a generous discount through my business connections, was mine. The $45,000 rental fee I'd quietly waived, letting them think I'd negotiated a deal with the owners. The property itself, worth millions, standing ready to host their perfect day? How much is the Morgan family contributing exactly? $30,000, which is incredibly generous considering Natalie's voice had taken on a defensive edge now. Considering what? Considering everything. The guest list is mostly Derek's family and their connections. They're established people, Dad. This wedding opens doors for us, for my future. I can't have you there talking about construction projects and wearing those awful work boots you love so much. I hadn't worn work boots to a formal event in 15 years, but facts had never been Natalie's strong suit when she wanted to justify something. She'd constructed a narrative where her blue-collar father would embarrass her in front of Connecticut elite, and no amount of reality would penetrate that story. Natalie, do you remember when you were 7 years old, right after your mother died? Dad, please don't make this about Mom. That's emotional manipulation. Answer the question. Do you remember? A sigh. Yes, I remember. You had nightmares every night for 6 months. You'd wake up screaming, terrified that I would die too and leave you alone. I slept on the floor of your bedroom for half a year because you couldn't fall asleep unless you could hear me breathing. That was a long time ago. I sold the house your mother and I had planned to retire in, took the money and bought a smaller place so I could afford Riverside Academy. You wanted to go there because your friend Chelsea went there. Do you remember what that school cost? Private school was important for my development. You always said education was an investment. $12,000 per year for 10 years. Then Northwestern University at $58,000 annually for your undergraduate degree. Another $70,000 for your master's program that you never finished. I'm not listing these numbers to shame you, Natalie. I'm listing them so you understand what investment means. I never asked you to spend that much. Those were your choices. You're right. They were your choices. Choices I made because I loved you and wanted to give you opportunities I never had. The question is, what did those opportunities teach you? Silence on the other end. Not the thoughtful kind, the stubborn kind. I'll come to the rehearsal dinner. That's my final offer on attendance. Natalie's voice had gone cold now, the way it did when she'd made up her mind and refused to reconsider. Derek's mother has already expressed concerns about the optics. I'm trying to balance everyone's needs here. The optics. My daughter had learned to talk like a corporate memo. I thought about Dorothy, how she would have handled this moment. My late wife had possessed a gift for cutting through pretense with a single question. What would she ask Natalie right now? Sweetheart, let me ask you something. When was the last time you asked me how I was doing? Not about money, not about logistics, just how I was doing as a person. The silence stretched longer this time. Through the phone, I could hear traffic noise. She was probably in her Pearl District apartment, staring out at the Portland cityscape, annoyed that this conversation was taking so long. I don't know. We talk regularly. We transact regularly. You call when you need something, I provide it. Then we hang up. When did we stop being father and daughter and become vendor and client? That's not fair. I've been busy planning this wedding. Do you have any idea how stressful this is? Actually, I do. I planned your mother's funeral when you were 17. Arranged every detail while you stayed with your aunt because you couldn't handle seeing the casket. I know exactly how stressful planning major life events can be. Dad, please I don't have time for a guilt trip right now. Are you going to respect my wishes about the wedding or not?
This was the moment, the fulcrum point where everything would shift. I could accept the diminished role she'd assigned me, show up to a rehearsal dinner like a tolerated relative, watch from the sidelines as she married into a family that considered me beneath notice, or I could teach my daughter something her expensive education had failed to provide, the understanding that actions carry consequences. I'll respect your wishes completely, Natalie. You won't have to worry about me attending any part of your wedding. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Relief flooded her voice. Thank you. I knew you'd understand once I explained everything properly. Derek's mother will be so pleased. This makes everything so much simpler. I'm sure it does. Enjoy your planning, sweetheart. I ended the call before she could respond. Outside, morning sun glinted off the lake. My phone sat silent on the table, no longer connecting me to the daughter who'd just uninvited me from the most important day of her life. Inside my head, plans were already forming. Not revenge, something more instructive. I picked up the phone again and dialed a different number, one I'd called many times over the past 8 years of property ownership. Andrew Sullivan answered on the second ring, his voice carrying the professional warmth of an experienced venue manager. Andrew, this is Walter Hayes. I need you to pull the booking contract for the Hayes-Morgan wedding scheduled for 3 weeks from now. Of course, Mr. Hayes. Is there an issue with the arrangements? You could say that. I need to know the exact cancellation terms and timeline, every detail. Papers rustled in the background. Give me just a moment. Andrew's tone had shifted, picking up on something in my voice. Here it is. Standard venue contract. Cancellation more than 30 days out results in 50% deposit forfeiture. Cancellation between 15 and 30 days, 75%. Less than 15 days, full amount due. Your daughter's wedding is scheduled for June 15th, which puts us at exactly 21 days out. Perfect. I need you to prepare cancellation documents. The venue will no longer be available for that date. Sir, with all respect, this is your daughter's wedding. Are you certain about this action? Andrew, how long have I worked for me? 8 years since you purchased the property. In that time, have I ever made a business decision I wasn't certain about? A pause. No, sir, you haven't. Then prepare the documents. I'll be at the venue this afternoon to discuss next steps. We're going to make some changes to Riverside Estate's immediate future. I hung up and stared at the invitation still lying on my table. Beautiful calligraphy spelling out my daughter's name, announcing her marriage at a venue she believed was just another business transaction. She had no idea the ground was already shifting beneath her perfect plans. The coffee was cold, but I drank it anyway. Bitter and dark, exactly the way the next 3 weeks would taste for everyone involved. Natalie wanted me removed from her special day. I was about to remove the day itself. My daughter had just learned a truth about negotiation she should have understood years ago. When you dismiss the person holding all the cards, you shouldn't be surprised when they decide to leave the table entirely. The game had begun. And, unlike Natalie's carefully staged wedding, this outcome wouldn't be determined by expensive invitations and social climbing. It would be determined by who actually owned what, and who had simply assumed their privilege would last forever. Time to make some phone calls, starting with my real estate attorney, Thomas Brennan, and ending with several very interested buyers who'd been hoping I'd sell Riverside Estate for years. 3 weeks until the wedding, more than enough time to turn perfect plans into expensive lessons. Thomas Brennan's office occupied the 12th floor of a glass tower in downtown Portland overlooking the Willamette River. I'd known Thomas for 23 years, since he'd handled the incorporation papers for Hayes Construction and Development. He'd witnessed every major business decision I'd made, every property acquisition, every strategic move that had built my modest fortune. When I walked into his office that Tuesday afternoon, he took one look at my face and knew something significant was about to happen. Walter, I wasn't expecting you today. Thomas gestured to the leather chair across from his desk, already reaching for his legal pad. His assistant brought coffee without being asked, a ritual we had established over decades of working together. What's on your mind? I need to sell Riverside Estate. Fast sale, cash buyer preferred, closing within 2 weeks if possible. Thomas set down his pen and studied me with the careful attention lawyers develop after years of reading between lines. That's your premier property. The venue business generates steady income and the real estate value has appreciated significantly. May I ask what's prompting this decision? My daughter's getting married there in 3 weeks. She called this morning to uninvite me from the ceremony because her future in-laws think I'm too working class for their social circle. The silence that followed was thick with understanding. Thomas had met Natalie several times over the years, always at events where she'd treated him with the same dismissive politeness she reserved for people she considered beneath her notice. He'd never said anything, but I'd seen his expression during those encounters. Recognition of a particular kind of entitled blindness. Does Natalie know you own the property? She's never asked. Assumed I'd negotiated a good rental rate through business connections. I waived the $45,000 venue fee as her wedding gift. She thanked me for getting a discount from the owners. Thomas picked up his pen again, this time with purpose. How much documentation do you want to preserve regarding your financial support over the years? Everything. I want a complete accounting of every dollar I've invested in her education, housing, transportation, and lifestyle since her mother died. 15 years of records? I want it organized, categorized, and prepared for potential legal review. You're thinking about a formal demand for repayment? I'm thinking about having options. Right now I'm focused on the property sale. The financial documentation is secondary but important. Thomas made notes in his characteristic shorthand, questions forming even as he wrote. Selling Riverside Estate this quickly will cost you in negotiation power. You'll likely accept below market value to close fast. Are you prepared for that financial impact? The property is worth approximately $2.8 million in current market conditions. I purchased it for $900,000 8 years ago. Even at a reduced price, I'll walk away with substantial profit. Money isn't the primary consideration here. What is the primary consideration? Teaching my daughter that her assumptions have consequences. She spent 32 years believing that financial support appears automatically, that property and privilege are her birthright, that she can dismiss the people who provide for her without impact. I'm correcting that misunderstanding. Thomas stopped writing and met my eyes directly. Walter, I've known you long enough to be frank. This is going to devastate her. Not just the wedding cancellation, but the public embarrassment, the social fallout, the relationship damage. Once you take these steps, walking them back becomes very difficult. I appreciate your concern, but consider this perspective. If I do nothing, what lesson does Natalie learn? That cruelty without accountability is acceptable? That gratitude is optional? That the people who sacrifice for her are interchangeable and disposable? I'd be enabling the exact behavior that made this moment possible. Fair point. Thomas returned to his notes. I'll contact the 3 most likely buyers immediately. All of them have expressed interest in Riverside Estate over the past 2 years. Given Portland's commercial real estate market, a motivated seller with clean title should have multiple offers within 72 hours. I need the sale closed before June 15th.
That's the wedding date. The venue needs to be legally unavailable before then. Aggressive timeline, but achievable with cash buyers. Thomas was already pulling up contact information on his computer. I'll start with Marcus Chen. He's been looking for a corporate retreat property for his tech company. Riverside Estate fits his requirements perfectly, and he has acquisition capital available. Perfect. Set up a meeting for tomorrow morning. I want to move on this immediately. One more question, Walter. What happens when Natalie discovers the venue is no longer available? She'll call you. She will. And I'll explain exactly why the property sale became necessary. She'll hear the complete story of ownership, waived fees, and the gift she never acknowledged. She'll understand what she actually dismissed when she uninvited me from her wedding. Thomas nodded slowly, the gesture of someone who'd seen enough family business disputes to know how these situations unfolded. You'll need to prepare for her response. Anger, accusations, potentially public statements that paint you negatively. Are you ready for that? I've been preparing for 15 years, watching her become someone her mother wouldn't recognize. Dorothy used to say that children need consequences more than they need comfort. She was right. I'll have preliminary sale documents ready by tomorrow afternoon. Thomas closed his legal pad with the finality of a decision made. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Painful, but right. The drive to Riverside Estate took 20 minutes through afternoon traffic. The property sprawled across 5 acres in the West Hills neighborhood, a restored Victorian mansion surrounded by manicured gardens and event spaces I'd spent years developing. Historic charm meeting modern amenities, the kind of venue that commanded premium prices and created magazine-worthy celebrations. Andrew Sullivan met me at the main entrance, his expression carrying professional concern mixed with personal curiosity. "Mr. Hayes, I've prepared the cancellation documents as requested. Before we proceed, I need to understand the full scope of what you're planning." We walked through the grand foyer, where Natalie had planned to make her entrance in 3 weeks. Afternoon light filtered through original stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across hardwood floors I'd personally overseen restoring. Every detail of this property represented thoughtful investment and careful stewardship. "I'm selling Riverside Estate. The sale needs to close within 2 weeks, which means your employment situation is about to change. I wanted to tell you directly before you heard through other channels." Andrew stopped walking, processing information that clearly caught him off guard. "Selling? But the venue's thriving. We're booked solid through next year. Revenue has increased every quarter since I started managing operations." "All true. This isn't a business decision in the traditional sense. My daughter is scheduled to marry here in 3 weeks. This morning, she uninvited me from the ceremony because I'm not socially acceptable to her future husband's family. She has no idea I own this property. The sale is her education about assumptions and consequences." Understanding dawned across Andrew's face. He'd interacted with Natalie during venue planning meetings, had witnessed her demanding attitude, her treatment of staff as interchangeable service providers, her assumption that her father's connections gave her special privileges. He'd never complained, but venue managers see everything. "What happens to the wedding booking?" "The new owner will decide. I'll recommend they honor existing contracts for events already booked and paid for. However, the Hayes-Morgan wedding has never been paid for. I waived all fees as a gift. Without payment on file, there's no contract to honor. So when the property changes hands, her venue disappears." "Exactly. She'll receive formal notification that Riverside Estate is under new ownership and her booking is canceled due to non-payment. She'll call me in a panic, and I'll explain that the venue she took for granted was never guaranteed, just like my presence at her wedding." Andrew walked to the windows overlooking the gardens where Natalie had planned her outdoor ceremony. White chairs were already stored in the event barn, waiting to be arranged. Floral displays had been designed. The catering team had finalized menus. Hundreds of hours of planning about to become irrelevant. What about my position here? New ownership typically means management changes. I'll recommend to the buyer that they retain you. You've run this venue excellently for 8 years. Your expertise has real value, but I can't make guarantees about decisions someone else will make after purchase. I appreciate your honesty." Andrew trended back from the window. "For what it's worth, I've watched your daughter visit this property a dozen times during planning. She's never once thanked the staff, acknowledged our expertise, or treated anyone as more than hired help. She speaks to her florist with more respect than she shows you." That assessment matched my own observations. Natalie had learned to value people based on their social utility rather than their inherent worth. The expensive education I'd funded had taught her networking and presentation skills, but failed completely at developing character or gratitude. Cancel all vendor contracts associated with the Hayes-Morgan wedding. Send formal notifications today that the venue is no longer available due to ownership transition. Include language about breach of contract due to non-payment. That will create immediate chaos. Her wedding is 3 weeks out. Vendors have already purchased flowers, ordered supplies, scheduled staff. The cancellations will ripple through every aspect of her planning. Good. Chaos creates clarity. Sometimes people need their perfect plans demolished before they can see what they've been taking for granted. Andrew pulled out his tablet and began making notes. I'll need authorization to contact all vendors: florist, catering, photography, music, rentals. This affects at least 15 different service providers. You have full authorization. Send the notifications by end of business today. Include my direct contact information for any questions or concerns. I want everything documented properly. Consider it done. Andrew's professional demeanor had returned, the venue manager executing necessary business even when that business carried personal weight. I'll also prepare a final accounting of all services and fees you've absorbed for this wedding, the waived venue rental, the staff time, the property usage. You should have documentation of everything you provided. Excellent thinking. Send that accounting to Thomas Brennan at Brennan & Associates. He's handling the comprehensive financial review. I left Riverside Estate as afternoon shifted toward evening. Behind me, the property stood elegant and peaceful, unaware that its purpose was about to change dramatically. Natalie's dream venue would be gone within 2 weeks. Her perfect wedding location would become someone else's corporate retreat or private estate. My phone remained silent during the drive home. Natalie hadn't called again after our morning conversation. She was probably celebrating her successful negotiation with Derek's family, believing she had managed the situation smoothly, protected her special day from potential embarrassment, made mature decisions about guest list optimization. She had no idea that every assumption supporting her perfect plans was already collapsing. The venue she took for granted was being sold. The father she dismissed was withdrawing every form of support. The privilege she considered permanent was about to be revealed as temporary and conditional. By the time I pulled into my Lake Oswego driveway, darkness had fallen across the city. Portland's lights twinkled in the distance, thousands of lives proceeding normally, while mine was executing calculated disruption. Tomorrow would bring property offers.
The day after would bring sale negotiations. Within a week, contracts would be signed and ownership would transfer. Natalie's wedding was scheduled for June 15th. Today was May 25th. 21 days until her ceremony at a venue that would no longer exist for her use. 21 days until she discovered that dismissing your father carries consequences that perfectly planned events cannot avoid. I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon and sat by the window overlooking the lake. Dorothy's photograph smiled at me from the bookshelf, forever frozen at age 49. She'd been gone 15 years, but I still consulted her memory during difficult decisions. What would you think about what I'm doing, my love? The photograph offered no answers, but I knew Dorothy's philosophy well enough. She'd believed that children needed to understand the weight of their choices, that privilege without gratitude bred entitlement, that love sometimes required letting people face the natural outcomes of their behavior. Natalie had chosen to exclude me from her wedding because my background embarrassed her. I was choosing to exclude her from the venue she'd taken for granted because her ingratitude had limits. Both choices would have consequences. The difference was, mine would be permanent and educational. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. Marcus Chen, extremely interested in Riverside Estate. Meeting scheduled tomorrow, 9 a.m. 2 other buyers also requesting immediate conversations. This will move fast. I replied with simple confirmation. Fast was exactly what I needed. Natalie's countdown to marital bliss had become a countdown to reality education. The clock was ticking, the property was selling, and my daughter's perfect plans were about to encounter the one obstacle her expensive education had never prepared her to handle, a father who finally said no. Marcus Chen arrived at Thomas Brennan's office precisely at 9 the next morning, accompanied by his CFO and real estate acquisition specialist. I recognized Marcus immediately from business circles. His technology company had grown from startup to major regional player in 7 years, and he'd earned a reputation for decisive action and fair dealing, the kind of buyer who could close a complex transaction in days rather than months. Walter, thank you for considering our interest in Riverside Estate. Marcus shook my hand with genuine warmth before settling into the conference room chair. I've attended 2 events at your venue over the past year. The property is exceptional. When Thomas mentioned you might be willing to sell, I cleared my calendar immediately. Thomas distributed folders containing property documentation, financial statements from the venue operations, and preliminary sale terms. Marcus's team opened theirs simultaneously, working with the synchronized efficiency of people accustomed to rapid evaluation. I'll be direct about my timeline requirements. I need to close this sale within 14 days. That's non-negotiable. I'm willing to accept a reasonable price reduction in exchange for speed and certainty. Marcus glanced at his CFO, some silent communication passing between them. We can work with that timeline. Our preliminary valuation puts Riverside Estate at $2.7 million based on comparable sales and income potential. Given your expedited closing requirement, we're prepared to offer $2.4 million, all cash, no financing contingencies. The number represented roughly $150,000 discount from full market value. Under normal circumstances, I'd negotiate harder, but normal circumstances didn't involve teaching my daughter that her assumptions had expiration dates. $2.5 million, and you have a deal. I want closing scheduled for June 10th. That gives you 16 days for due diligence and paperwork. Marcus didn't hesitate. Done. We'll start property inspection today and have our attorneys draft purchase agreements by tomorrow afternoon. His acquisition specialist was already making notes on her tablet, timelines forming in real time. One condition: the venue currently has bookings scheduled for the next 18 months. I recommend you honor all contracts where full payment has been received. There's one booking scheduled for June 15th where no payment exists on record. That contract should be canceled immediately upon ownership transfer. The Hayes Morgan wedding. Marcus's expression shifted to something like understanding. Thomas briefed me on the personal circumstances. I'm not comfortable being weaponized in a family dispute, Walter. Whatever your reasons for selling, they're yours to manage. I appreciate your position. Let me clarify. My daughter booked that venue believing I'd negotiated a rental discount through business connections. She's never asked who owned the property. I waived all fees as a wedding gift. The booking exists on our schedule, but no contract with payment has ever been executed. From a purely business standpoint, you'd be within rights to cancel an unpaid reservation when acquiring the property. Marcus studied me for a long moment. His success in business came partly from reading people accurately, understanding motivations that others kept hidden. Whatever calculation he was running, he reached some conclusion that satisfied him. I'll honor all paid contracts. The unpaid booking gets standard notification of ownership change and cancellation due to lack of binding agreement. My conscience stays clean, and your situation resolves itself. That's all I'm asking. Thomas slid additional documents across the table. These are complete financial records for venue operations over the past 8 years. Revenue, expenses, vendor relationships, staffing costs, everything you need for comprehensive due diligence. The meeting lasted another 90 minutes as Marcus's team examined every detail of the property's business operations and physical condition. They asked intelligent questions about maintenance history, insurance, local permitting, neighborhood relations, professional buyers conducting proper evaluation despite the compressed timeline. By the time we stood to finalize preliminary agreements, Marcus had committed fully to the purchase. His attorney would coordinate with Thomas on all legal documentation. Property inspection was scheduled for that afternoon. Environmental assessments and title work would proceed simultaneously over the next week. I walked out of Thomas's office with a handshake agreement worth $2.5 million and a closing date of June 10th, 5 days before Natalie's wedding. 5 days before she'd received notification that her venue had been sold and her booking canceled. My phone buzzed as I reached my truck. Text from Natalie. Dad, just confirming you're okay with the rehearsal dinner plan. Derek's mom wants to finalize the guest list. Thanks for being understanding about everything. The casual presumption in her message was almost impressive. She'd uninvited me from her ceremony and expected gratitude for being allowed to attend a dinner. No acknowledgement of hurt caused, no recognition that her decision carried weight, just transactional communication from daughter to father as service provider. I typed a response. Enjoy your planning, sweetheart. Everything is proceeding exactly as it should be. The next 72 hours moved with mechanical precision. Marcus's team conducted property inspection on Wednesday, finding nothing that raised concerns. Environmental assessments came back clean on Thursday morning. Title company confirmed no liens or encumbrances on Friday morning. Thomas and Marcus's attorneys worked around the clock drafting purchase agreements, coordinating with escrow companies, preparing documents for signatures. By Friday afternoon, I sat in Thomas's conference room signing papers that transferred ownership of Riverside Estate from Walter Hayes to Chen Technology Solutions, LLC.
The closing was scheduled for the following Tuesday, June 10th, exactly 5 days before Natalie's wedding date. Andrew Sullivan called me Saturday morning as I was having coffee on my deck. "Mr. Hayes, I need to inform you that your daughter visited the venue yesterday. She wanted to confirm some setup details for the wedding. I didn't mention anything about the pending sale as you'd instructed, but she asked several questions about my employment status and venue ownership that made me uncomfortable." "What kind of questions?" "She wanted to know if I'd be managing the property long-term, asked about ownership structure and whether there were any plans for changes to operations. It felt like she was fishing for information without asking directly." "Interesting. She's never shown interest in those details before. What did you tell her?" "That management decisions were above my level of authority and she should contact you with any concerns about venue operations. She seemed frustrated by that answer." "You handled it correctly. Maintain normal operations until the ownership transfer is complete. After Tuesday, Marcus Chen's team will provide direction on how they want things managed going forward." "Understood." Andrew paused before continuing. "Mr. Hayes, I've worked for you for 8 years. I've never questioned your business decisions, but I need to know, are you certain this is the right approach with your daughter? Once Tuesday happens, there's no walking this back." "I'm certain. Sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is let their child experience the natural consequences of their choices. Natalie chose to value social status over family connection. She's about to learn what that choice actually costs." The weekend passed slowly, each hour bringing us closer to Tuesday's closing. I spent Saturday afternoon going through 15 years of financial records that Thomas's paralegal had organized into comprehensive documentation. Every tuition payment to Riverside Academy and Northwestern University, every car purchase, insurance premium and maintenance cost, every apartment rental subsidy during Natalie's early 20s, every credit card payment when her spending exceeded income she wasn't earning. The total came to $683,000 over 32 years. Not quite the million-dollar figure from the original story I'd been told, but substantial enough to make the point. Nearly $700,000 in support, provided without question, acknowledgement, or gratitude. Thomas had organized everything into categories with supporting documentation: education costs, transportation expenses, housing support, lifestyle subsidies. Each category contained bank statements, canceled checks, credit card records, wire transfer confirmations. Undeniable proof of decades spent funding a lifestyle Natalie believed was her natural right. I printed copies of the complete financial summary, 38 pages of numbers telling the story of a father's love translated into currency, a daughter's entitlement measured in dollars and cents. The documents would remain filed unless circumstances required their disclosure, but having them ready provided a certain clarity. Sunday brought a different kind of call. Derek's mother, Constance Morgan, phoning from Connecticut with the clipped authority of someone accustomed to managing situations. "Walter, this is Constance Morgan. I wanted to reach out personally to thank you for being so understanding about the ceremony arrangements. Natalie mentioned how graciously you accepted the modified attendance plan." The audacity was remarkable. Constance had orchestrated my exclusion from my daughter's wedding, and now expected appreciation for my cooperation? I kept my voice neutral, professional, revealing nothing about what was coming. "I appreciate you calling, Constance.
I'm always interested in what Natalie tells people about our conversations. She speaks very highly of you. It's clear she values your support tremendously. The ceremony will be intimate and elegant. Derek's family has certain expectations for these occasions, I'm sure you understand. I understand completely. In fact, I understand far more than Natalie realizes. Tell me, Constance, has your family contributed the $30,000 they promised for wedding expenses? A pause. The check was sent to the venue last week. Why do you ask? Just confirming financial arrangements. It's important that everyone honors their commitments, don't you think? Of course. The Morgan family takes our obligations very seriously. Excellent. I'm sure the next few days will reveal exactly who honors which obligations. Enjoy the remainder of your weekend, Constance. I ended the call before she could respond. The Morgan family check for $30,000 sat in Riverside Estate's accounts, payment for a venue rental that would cease to exist in 48 hours. They'd discover soon enough that social status couldn't override property law, and that presuming someone's cooperation was different than securing it. Monday arrived with morning fog rolling off the Willamette River, Portland wrapped in gray mist that matched my mood. Tomorrow the sale would close. Tomorrow Natalie's venue would legally belong to Marcus Chen. Tomorrow Andrew Sullivan would send formal cancellation notices to every vendor associated with the Hayes Morgan wedding. Thomas called at 10. Everything is set for tomorrow's closing. Marcus's funds will wire at 9, we'll sign final documents at 10, and the title company will record the deed by noon. Riverside Estate will belong to Chen Technology Solutions before lunch. And the cancellation notices? Andrew has them prepared. They'll go out Tuesday afternoon, immediately after the title records record. Every vendor will receive formal notification that the Hayes Morgan wedding is canceled due to venue ownership change and lack of binding contract. What about the Morgan family's $30,000 payment? Marcus has agreed to refund it in full as a goodwill gesture. They'll receive their money back with a polite letter explaining the ownership transition. No one can claim financial harm. Good. I want this handled professionally. No room for accusations of theft or fraud. Just clean business practices resulting in natural consequences. You've covered every angle, Walter. Whatever happens next, you've protected yourself legally and ethically. The rest is between you and your daughter. I spent Monday afternoon driving past Riverside Estate one final time as its owner. The property looked peaceful in spring sunshine, gardens blooming with early summer flowers, the Victorian mansion standing elegant against blue sky. Someone else would steward this place tomorrow, someone who'd purchased it as a business asset rather than building it as a legacy meant to be passed down. Natalie had never asked about the venue's ownership, never wondered how her father had secured such favorable terms, never questioned why a premier Portland event location would waive $45,000 in fees. She'd simply accepted the gift without curiosity, taken the privilege without gratitude, and moved forward with planning that assumed my resources were infinite and unconditional. Tomorrow, she'd learn differently. Tomorrow, the venue she'd taken for granted would vanish from her wedding plans. Tomorrow, her perfect day would collide with reality that no amount of social climbing could prevent. My phone stayed silent all day.
Natalie hadn't called since her text on Wednesday. She was probably finalizing details with Derek's family, coordinating with vendors, preparing for a ceremony that would never happen at the location she'd chosen. Blissfully unaware that her father had spent the past week dismantling every assumption supporting her plans. I poured bourbon that evening and sat watching darkness fall across Lake Oswego. Dorothy's photograph caught lamplight, her smile eternal and knowing. She'd understood that love sometimes required difficult choices, that protecting children from consequences harmed them more than experiencing those consequences ever could. Tomorrow, my daughter would begin learning lessons her expensive education had failed to teach. Tomorrow, the real education would begin. And unlike Northwestern University or Riverside Academy, This school wouldn't accept payment in lieu of understanding. Some lessons could only be purchased with humility. Natalie's tuition was coming due. Tuesday morning arrived with crystalline clarity, the kind of June day that makes Portland residents forget about 9 months of rain. I met Thomas and Marcus at the title company office at 9 sharp, briefcase containing final documents and wire transfer confirmations. The conference room smelled of fresh coffee and new paper, the scent of transactions that would reshake multiple lives. Marcus's wire transfer hit the escrow account at 9:14. $2.5 million moving electronically from Chen Technology Solutions to the title company, then splitting into various directions. My account would receive the bulk after closing costs and fees. The Morgan family would get their $30,000 back. Various administrative expenses would be settled. Clean, professional, irreversible. We signed documents for 40 minutes. Purchase agreement, deed transfer, title insurance, property disclosures, warranty statements, each signature bringing us closer to the moment when Riverside Estate would cease being mine and become Marcus's corporate asset. Thomas reviewed every page with his characteristic thoroughness, ensuring no detail was overlooked or mishandled. At 10:37, the title company representative smiled and pushed the final document across the table. Congratulations, Mr. Chen. You are now the official owner of Riverside Estate and Gardens. The deed will be recorded with Multnomah County within the hour. Marcus shook my hand with genuine respect. Walter, I appreciate how smoothly you've handled this transaction. Most property sales involving family complications get messy. You've kept everything professional and clean. I've had practice separating business from emotion. 30 years of construction and development teaches you that feelings don't change facts, and wishful thinking doesn't alter reality. My daughter is about to receive the same education. Thomas walked me to my truck after the closing concluded. The check, representing my proceeds, sat in my jacket pocket. Certified funds that would clear into my account within 24 hours. Profit from 8 years of property ownership and the final severance of my connection to Natalie's wedding plans. Andrew will send the cancellation notices this afternoon. Every vendor, every service provider, and directly to Natalie herself. She'll know by evening that her venue is gone. I climbed into the truck and checked my phone. Still no calls from Natalie. She was probably busy with final fittings or flower selections, coordinating details for a ceremony that would never occur at her chosen location. The irony was almost poetic. While she obsessed over centerpieces and seating charts, the foundation of her entire event had been legally transferred to someone else. The drive home took me past Riverside Estate one final time. As a former owner rather than current one, I felt unexpectedly detached. The property had served its purpose in my life, first as an investment and income source, then as an educational tool for my daughter. Marcus would steward it well, probably more efficiently than I had while managing it as a side business alongside semi-retirement. At 2:30 that afternoon, my phone rang. Andrew Sullivan's name appeared on the screen. Mr. Hayes, the cancellation notices have been sent. All vendors received formal notification that the Hayes-Morgan wedding is canceled effective immediately due to venue ownership change. I also sent a registered letter to your daughter's address explaining the situation. How did you word it? Very carefully. The letter states that Riverside Estate has been sold to new ownership, that the property is no longer available for her June 15th booking, and that no binding contract existed due to lack of payment on file. I included the new owner's contact information in case she wants to discuss the situation with Mr. Chen. Perfect. Professional, factual, leaving no room for accusations of malice or impropriety. Mr. Hayes, if I may ask, when she calls you, and she will call you, what are you going to say? The truth, that I owned the venue, waived the rental fee as a wedding gift, and sold the property after she decided I wasn't suitable company for her ceremony. Simple cause and effect. I hung up and waited. The cancellation letter had been sent at 2:15. Depending on when Natalie checked her mail or email, I'd estimate first contact within 2 to 4 hours. Enough time for the information to sink in, for panic to build, for the full scope of the situation to become clear. My phone stayed silent until 5:43. Then, Natalie's name lit up the screen with an incoming call. I let it ring for 4 times before answering, maintaining the calm that had carried me through this entire process. "Hello, Natalie?" "Dad, what the hell did you do?" Her voice came through shaking with fury and disbelief. "I just got a letter saying Riverside Estate has been sold and my wedding is canceled. This has to be some kind of mistake." "No mistake. I sold the property. The sale closed this morning. New owner took possession at 10:37. "You sold? You don't own Riverside Estate. You just helped me book it at a discount." "I've owned Riverside Estate for 8 years. Purchased it in 2017 for $900,000, developed it into a successful event venue, sold it yesterday for $2.5 million. You never asked about ownership. You assumed." The silence that followed carried weight I could feel through the phone connection, Natalie processing information that contradicted her entire understanding of the situation. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted to something closer to desperation. "But my wedding is in 11 days. 11 days, Dad. Do you have any idea how impossible it is to find a venue with that kind of notice?" "I imagine it's quite difficult. Comparable properties in Portland are typically booked a year in advance. You might need to consider significant compromises on your vision." "Compromises? Dad, we have 200 guests confirmed. Derek's family flew in from Connecticut for planning meetings. The invitations have been mailed. This isn't something I can just reschedule or relocate casually." "Then perhaps you should have treated the person providing your venue with more respect. Actions have consequences, even for people accustomed to taking things for granted." Her breathing quickened, rage building beneath the panic. "This is insane. You're destroying my wedding because I hurt your feelings? Because I made one decision about guest list management that you didn't like? Let me clarify what actually happened. You uninvited me from your wedding ceremony because your future mother-in-law thinks I'm too working class for her social circle. You told me I don't fit in with the kind of people that matter. You reduced 32 years of parental sacrifice to an embarrassing background detail that needed managing. I was trying to make everyone happy. That's what adults do. They compromise and find solutions that work for multiple parties. No, Natalie. Adults honor their commitments and show gratitude for support they've received."
Children throw tantrums when they can't have everything exactly as they want it. You've been acting like a child for years, and I've been enabling that behavior by providing consequences-free support. So this is punishment? You're punishing me for being honest about social dynamics that mattered to my marriage? This is education. For 32 years, I've given you everything you've asked for without question. Private school, expensive university, multiple cars, housing support, career funding when your jobs didn't work out. You've taken all of it and never once stopped to ask what it cost me or where it came from. The venue was just another gift you accepted without curiosity or appreciation. I thanked you for getting the discount. I've always been grateful for your support. Have you? When was the last time you called just to ask how I was doing? Not to request money or favors, but to actually check on your father's well-being. Silence again. Longer this time. I could hear her breathing, could imagine her standing in her Pearl District apartment staring out at Portland, her perfect plans crumbling like structures built on sand. That's not fair. I've been busy planning this wedding. You know how much work goes into these events. I planned your mother's funeral while you stayed with relatives because you couldn't handle the emotional weight. I know exactly how much work major life events require. The difference is I handled mine while supporting you. You can't handle yours while showing basic consideration to the person who's funded your lifestyle. What do you want from me, Dad? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. I'm sorry I made a bad decision about the ceremony. Can we fix this now? Can you call the new owner and explain the situation? The new owner's name is Marcus Chen. His contact information was in the cancellation letter. You're welcome to call him and explain why he should provide his newly acquired property for free to someone he's never met. See how that conversation goes. You can't just leave me hanging like this. I'm your daughter. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It means everything to me. That's why I'm doing this. Because watching you become an entitled, ungrateful person who values social status over family connection breaks my heart. Your mother would be devastated to see what you've become. Don't you dare bring Mom into this. She would understand that I'm trying to build a good life with someone I love. Your mother would understand that gratitude and humility matter more than impressing people who judge worth by bank accounts and family names. She'd be ashamed that her daughter uninvited her father from a wedding he'd spent 8 years preparing to gift her. I didn't know you owned the venue. How was I supposed to know when you never told me? You never asked. In 32 years of me providing everything you needed, you've never once asked where the money came from or what I sacrificed to give it to you. That incuriosity is exactly the problem. Fine, you've made your point. I'm selfish and entitled and terrible. Now what? Do I just cancel my wedding? Call 200 guests and tell them the ceremony is off because my father decided to teach me a lesson? You figure it out. That's what adults do when their assumptions prove incorrect. They adapt, they solve problems, they take responsibility for the situations they've created. Consider this your first real test of adulthood. Dad, please, I'm begging you, help me fix this. I'll do anything. I'll apologize properly. I'll make changes. Just please don't let my wedding be destroyed because of this. The desperation in her voice was real now. Not manipulative pleading, but genuine fear. She was finally understanding that her actions had created consequences she couldn't charm or negotiate away. I felt a flicker of the old protective instinct, the father's impulse to rescue his daughter from pain. Then I remembered her voice on the phone 6 days ago, explaining why I wasn't suitable company for her ceremony. The casual cruelty wrapped in reasonable-sounding justifications. The assumption that my feelings were less important than her social advancement. Natalie, I love you. I always have. But love doesn't mean enabling destructive behavior. You need to solve this problem yourself. Find a new venue. Scale down your plans. Postpone if necessary. Whatever you decide, you'll do it without my financial support or intervention. So that's it? You're just abandoning me when I need you most? I'm giving you the opportunity to become someone capable of handling adversity without a safety net, something your expensive education apparently failed to provide. Good luck with your planning. I ended the call before she could respond. My hand was shaking slightly as I set the phone down. Not from doubt about my decision, but from the emotional weight of hearing my daughter's panic and choosing not to rescue her from it. The phone rang again immediately, Natalie's name flashing. I declined the call. It rang 4 more times over the next hour. Each call went to voicemail. Each voicemail grew more desperate, more emotional, cycling through anger, bargaining, and increasingly frantic pleading. By 8 that evening, I'd received 17 calls and 12 text messages. The texts ranged from furious accusations to heartbroken appeals. Derek's family was demanding explanations. Vendors were asking who would pay cancellation fees. Guests were confused about whether the wedding was still happening. Her perfect day had become a crisis management situation with no clear solution. I poured bourbon and sat on my deck watching sunset paint the lake in gold and orange. Somewhere across Portland, Natalie was experiencing the first real consequences of her choices. No amount of social connections or manipulation would fix this situation. No amount of tears would change the legal reality that Riverside Estate was belonging to someone else now. Tomorrow would bring more calls, more desperate attempts to find solutions or assign blame. But tonight was mine. The first evening in 32 years where I wasn't responsible for solving my daughter's problems or funding her desires. The weight of that liberation felt unexpectedly heavy. Freedom mixed with grief for what our relationship had become. Dorothy's photograph watched me from inside the house. Her eternal smile, neither approving nor condemning, just present. The way she'd always been during difficult parenting decisions. We'd agreed long ago that children needed to face reality eventually, that sheltering them from consequences created adults who couldn't function when protection disappeared. Natalie was facing reality now. The question was whether she'd learn from it or simply find new people to blame for her situation.
time would provide that answer. My role in her education was complete. What happened next was entirely up to her. 3 days passed in relative silence. Natalie's frantic calls decreased to occasional text messages, each one shorter and more defeated than the last. She had apparently found a small banquet hall in Beaverton, willing to accommodate her wedding on short notice, though it lacked the elegance and prestige of Riverside Estate. The ceremony would proceed, just not in the way she had envisioned. Thursday afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. I was working in my garage, organizing tools I rarely used anymore, when a silver Mercedes pulled into my driveway. Constance Morgan emerged wearing what I'd come to recognize as her armor: designer sunglasses, tailored suit, the bearing of someone accustomed to getting her way through sheer force of status. "Walter, we need to talk." She didn't wait for an invitation, simply walked toward me with determined stride. "What you've done to Natalie is unconscionable."
Derek is beside himself trying to manage the fallout from your vindictive behavior. I set down the wrench I'd been holding and faced her directly. "Constance, you're on my property, uninvited. I suggest you choose your next words very carefully. That venue was perfect for our families. You had no right to sell it out from under your own daughter just to prove some petty point about being excluded from the ceremony. I had every right. I owned the property. Natalie had no contract, no payment on file, just assumptions based on privileges she'd taken for granted her entire life. When she decided I wasn't suitable company for her wedding, I decided my property wasn't suitable for her use." Constance removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes sharp with calculation. "How much would it take to undo this? Name your price. I'll write a check right now to buy back that venue or compensate you for whatever financial loss you claim to have suffered." The offer revealed everything I needed to know about how the Morgan family operated. Every problem could be solved with money, every inconvenience purchased away, every principle negotiable if the price was right. "Constance, there isn't enough money in your family's portfolio to change what's already happened. This was never about finances. It was about teaching my daughter that people aren't disposable just because they don't enhance her social standing. She's devastated. You've ruined what should be the happiest day of her life. She ruined it herself when she decided her father's presence was less important than impressing your social circle. I simply declined to continue subsidizing her delusion that privilege comes without gratitude or consequence." Constance's expression hardened into something colder. The Morgan family has significant influence in this region. Business connections, political relationships, the ability to make life very difficult for people who cross us. I'd hate to see your construction company's reputation suffer due to this unfortunate situation. The threat was delivered with practiced smoothness, wrapped in concern, but unmistakably clear. I almost smiled at the predictability of it. "Constance, I'm 67 years old and semi-retired. My company's reputation was built over 40 years of quality work and fair dealing. If you believe your social connections can destroy that in retaliation for your future daughter-in-law's bad behavior, you're welcome to try. But I suspect you'll find that threats work better in Connecticut boardrooms than in Portland construction circles." She stood silent for a moment, recalculating now that intimidation had failed to achieve the desired result. Finally, she replaced her sunglasses and turned back toward her Mercedes. "Derek deserves better than this chaos. He's marrying into dysfunction he didn't sign up for. Derek is marrying a woman who learned entitlement from experts like you. Maybe he'll teach her better values than her father apparently could. Or maybe they'll both continue believing that money and status excuse cruelty. Either way, it's no longer my concern." Constance drove away without another word, tires crunching on gravel as she left my property. I returned to my tools, hands steady despite the confrontation. The Morgan family had revealed their approach to problems: buy them, threaten them, manipulate them away. Natalie had found her people. Friday brought the phone call I'd been half expecting. Natalie's number appeared on my screen just after lunch. I answered on the third ring. "Dad?" Her voice sounded different now. Tired, maybe.
less angry, more resigned. I'm calling to let you know the wedding is happening. Sunday at 2, Oak Hills Banquet Center in Beaverton. Derek and I decided to move forward despite everything. I'm glad you found a solution. It's not what I wanted. The place is small, the gardens are mediocre, and half the guests we invited won't fit in the space. But it's what I could arrange with 4 days of notice after my father destroyed my original plans. I didn't destroy anything, Natalie. I simply stopped providing things you'd never asked for or appreciated. There's a difference. A long pause. Then her voice came back quieter, stripped of the defensive anger that had characterized our previous conversations. I talked to Aunt Carol yesterday. She told me some things about Mom I didn't remember, about how she used to say I needed to learn that not everything would come easy. Your mother believed in natural consequences. She thought sheltering children from the results of their choices did more harm than letting them face reality. Carol said Mom would have supported what you did, that she'd warned you about spoiling me too much after she was gone. Another pause. Heavier this time. Was she right? Did you spoil me? I loved you, Natalie. After your mother died, I wanted to give you everything she couldn't, every opportunity, every advantage, every bit of security I could provide. Somewhere in that process, I forgot to require gratitude or reciprocity. I created someone who expected rather than appreciated. I don't know how to fix this, Dad. I don't know how to be the person you wanted me to become. Start by being honest with yourself about who you are right now. You dismissed your father from your wedding because it served your social climbing. You took decades of support without acknowledging the sacrifice behind it. Those are facts, not attacks. So what happens now? Do we just never speak again? Do I get married without my father there at all? That's your choice to make. I'll always love you, Natalie, but I won't continue enabling behavior that turned you into someone your mother wouldn't recognize. If you want a relationship with me going forward, it needs to be between two adults who respect each other, not between a provider and a consumer. The silence stretched long enough that I thought she might have hung up. Then her voice came back, barely above a whisper. I'm sorry, Dad, for all of it. For taking you for granted, for dismissing you, for never asking what anything cost you. I'm sorry I became someone who thought social status mattered more than family. The apology sounded genuine, not the manipulative kind she'd offered in previous calls, but real acknowledgement of harm caused. It was a start, though only that. Thank you for saying that. Now prove you mean it by becoming someone different going forward. Get a real job and keep it. Support yourself without my subsidies. Build a marriage based on partnership rather than entitlement. Show me through actions that you've learned something from this experience. Will you come to the wedding? Even just to the reception? I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking anyway. I considered the question carefully.
The easy answer was no, maintaining boundaries and consequences. But Dorothy's voice in my memory reminded me that teaching also required recognizing growth when it appeared. I'll come to the ceremony, not because you've earned it yet, but because everyone deserves a chance to prove they can change. Don't make me regret giving you that chance. Thank you, Dad. I won't. We ended the call with tentative understanding replacing the anger and hurt that had defined our recent conversations. I had no illusions that Natalie's transformation would be immediate or complete. Decades of entitlement couldn't be undone with one apology and a wedding crisis. But she'd taken the first step toward awareness, and that was more than she'd shown in years. Sunday arrived warm and clear, perfect weather for a wedding despite the venue's humble surroundings. I arrived at Oak Hills Banquet Center 15 minutes early, wearing my best suit and the dignity of a father who'd taught his daughter an expensive but necessary lesson. Natalie met me at the entrance, her wedding dress simpler than the extravagant gown she'd originally chosen, her expression nervous but genuine. "Dad, you came?" "I told you I would. I'm a man of my word, even when others aren't." She hugged me then, the first real embrace we'd shared in years. Not the perfunctory greeting of obligatory family contact, but actual connection between father and daughter who'd survived something difficult together. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. Derek's family maintained their polite distance, but I noticed several guests watching me with curiosity rather than judgment. Apparently, word had spread about the venue situation, and opinions were divided about whether I'd been cruel or justified. I didn't particularly care which conclusion they reached. During the reception, Natalie approached me with Derek beside her. "We wanted to tell you together. We're not accepting any wedding gifts. We're asking guests to donate to grief counseling services for children who've lost parents, in Mom's memory." It was a small gesture, but meaningful. Recognition that her mother's absence had shaped both our lives in ways Natalie was only beginning to understand. I nodded approval, throat tight with emotion I hadn't expected to feel. Your mother would be proud of that decision.
The evening ended with cautious optimism rather than triumphant reconciliation. Natalie had taken the first steps toward becoming someone capable of gratitude and self-reflection. Whether those steps would continue or fade once the crisis passed remained to be seen. But she'd been given the education she needed, paid the tuition required for genuine growth, and survived the experience with at least the potential for transformation. I drove home that night, thinking about legacy and lessons, about the difference between love that enables and love that teaches. Dorothy had been right all along. Children need consequences more than comfort. Natalie had finally received hers, and time would reveal whether she'd learned from them or simply resented them. Either way, I'd done what needed doing. The rest was up to her. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.